Welcome back, dear students of class 7. Today we are going to study the part 3 of the chapter 10 tables and forms in HTML. Students, in this part we are going to continue studying the attributes of the table tag. Now, in the previous part, students, you have studied different attributes of the table tag. You have already studied the border attribute. Then you studied the border color attribute. After that, we have studied BG color and the align attribute. In this part, we are going to talk about the cell padding attribute first, and then cell spacing, and then height and width attribute. So let us quickly begin first with the cell padding attribute. What is cell padding? Okay, students. Cell padding attribute sets the margins within the cell. Okay, it sets the amount of space in between the cell border and the cell data. Let me explain you the meaning of these two lines first. Okay, the cell padding attribute sets the margins within the cells. What is the meaning of margins within the cells? The margins within the cells means the amount of space between the cell border and the cell data. So, if I talk about this particular cell, let me explain you. If I talk about this particular cell, okay, if I talk about this particular cell, students, you can notice that this bindu that is written over here, this is the cell data. Yes, this is the cell data. Just a minute. This is the cell data. So what is the amount of space between the cell border? What is the cell border? This is the cell border. Okay, this is the cell border. So there is a space between this cell border and the cell data. You can see from all the four sides there is a blank space. This is what is cell padding. Okay, you can increase or decrease this space between the cell data and the cell border. This is called as cell padding. Okay, if I can increase this space between this data, cell data and cell border by using the attribute which is called as cell padding. Okay, the value of this attribute, the value of cell padding attribute is always indicated in pixels. Okay, how to use this cell attribute, cell padding attribute? You can in the table tag. Okay, with the table tag you can use this cell padding attribute and equals to set the value in numbers or pixels. Okay, so as you can see in this example, they have given the cell padding of 10. So currently what is the space between this B and this, that means the cell data and the cell border, it is 10 pixels. From here to here also it is 10 pixels. From here to here it is 10 pixels, and so on, it is 10 pixels. Same for all the other uh, cells, it is 10 pixels. Okay, students. So let us quickly see the same attribute cell padding with the help of an example. So I'll just open the same table that we had made earlier without the cell padding. I'm going to open this with Notepad, and I'm also going to show you the table that we created earlier. So this was the table that we had created earlier, students. Okay, you can clearly see that we have not used any cell padding attribute over here. Okay, see, this is the table tag. We have not used cell padding as of now. Let's use the cell padding. So I'll just type cell padding. The spelling is very important. You should use always write the correct spelling of the tags and the attributes. So if I make it instead of 10, I'm going to make it 20. Okay. And now after giving the value as 20 pixels, okay, I'm just going to save this notepad file. And now let us quickly check what is the output. So when I open this, you can clearly see that the amount of space has increased between the cell data, see, and the cell's border. So this space between the cell data and cell border is called as cell padding. If you want to increase it more, you can do that also. You can just open the code in notepad, and instead of 20, let's type 40, and let's check if the cell padding has doubled or not. So you can now clearly see that the amount of space has been doubled. Earlier it was like this from year to year. Now it is, the cell padding is more. Okay, so this from year to year, right now it is 40 pixels. Same thing over here. So this attribute that increases helps us to either increase or decrease the amount of space between what? The cell border and the cell data is called as cell padding. I hope cell padding is very clear to you guys. Moving on to the next attribute, that is the cell spacing attribute. Let's talk about the cell spacing attribute. The name itself implies cell spacing. That means spaces between the cells. Okay, students, spacing between the cell. So let's quickly compare these two figures that are shown over here. First, let's talk about this figure. If you can see, let's talk about this figure first. If you can see over here, this is a cell, this is another cell. Okay, and you can see that the distance between these two cells which are besides each other is more than what it was over here. Okay, so that attribute that helps us in increasing the space between the two adjacent cells, okay, is called as a cell spacing. See, the cell spacing attribute is used to set the minimum distance between two adjacent cells. Okay, to increase or decrease the distance between two adjacent cells. What is meaning of adjacent cells? Adjacent means neighboring cells. Okay, for example, if I talk about this cell, okay, the neighboring or adjacent cells of these cells is this one and this one. Okay, these are the adjacent. This one is an adjacent cell of this, and this is also an adjacent cell to this. So if you want to set the distance between increase or decrease the distance between adjacent cells, you have to use which attribute? The cell spacing attribute. Okay, cell spacing is also measured in pixels. Just like cell padding, cell spacing is also measured in pixels. Don't get confused within cell spacing and cell padding. Cell padding increases or decreases the distance between the cell data and cell border, but cell spacing increases or decreases the distance between two adjacent cells. Okay, so let us see how cell spacing works. So for example, over here, see, they have used inside the table tag, they have used cell spacing. Okay, cell spacing equals to 10. So right now the distance between the adjacent cells in this particular table from here to here, this distance is how much? How many pixels? 10 pixels. Okay, so let us and one more tip is given over here. This is very important point. See, a tip is given. The default value of both cell padding and cell spacing is 2. What is the meaning of this? If you don't use this and this attribute or this attribute, if you don't use these two attributes, then the default cell padding value will be 2 and default cell spacing value will also be 2. Okay, now let us quickly uh, study cell spacing with the help of an example. So I'll just remove this cell padding. If you want to keep it, you can keep it. Okay, let's talk about cell spacing. So I'm writing cell spacing equals to, I'll just give 20. Okay, and now I'll save this file. Okay, students, earlier, see, the space between the adjacent cells is what? It is 2 pixels. Okay, earlier it was 2 pixels, but now let me open after saving the file. See, the amount of space has increased from 20 to from 2 to 20. So now the distance or the amount of space between the adjacent cells is how much? 20 pixels. Okay, if you want to increase, you can increase the value. If you want to decrease, you can decrease the value. So from 20, I've made it 10 and I've saved it and I'm refreshing it. Now the cell spacing is only 10 pixels. So this is how we are going to use the cell padding and cell spacing attributes. I hope this is very, very clear to you guys. Moving on to the next attribute. The next attribute is our height and width. So next two attributes are height and width. We are going to study both these attributes together only. Okay. Now see students, what is height and width? Height means the vertical length of the table. Okay. From here to here, this is the height of the entire table. Okay. Then we have height of the cell also. Different cells also have their own height. In the same manner, this horizontal from here to here, this is the width of the table. From here to here, this is the width of the table. Okay. Now, with the help of this height attribute and width attribute, you can increase or decrease the height and width of the table. Okay. You can also use height and width attribute to increase or decrease the height and width of individual cells also. Okay. That will be taught later on. First, let us increase the height of the table and width of the table using the attributes height and width. So by default, the size of the table is as large as the data that is entered into it. What is the meaning of this line? This line simply means that by default, see, this table has a height. Now, we created this table. We never mentioned any height or width. We have not mentioned any height and width. The table has taken its own height and width. How it has taken? It has taken height and width based on the data that we have entered. So the width of the table is from here to here because we have entered this data. If we would have entered some other data, then the height would have increased or decreased based on the amount of data that we have typed in it. In the same manner, the width, this is the height of the data of the table. So the height of the table is from here to here. It depends on this data that we have written inside the table. If we write more data or if we increase the size of this data, then the height will also increase and so on. Okay. So by default, the height and width is depends upon the amount of data that you have entered inside the table. But if you want to change the height and width of the table, you can use height and width attributes with your table tag. Okay. So if you want to increase the height and width of the entire table, then you can use the height and width attributes with the table tag. Okay. I'll just show you. First, I'll increase the height of the table. So let us come to the table tag and over here I'll write height equals to, suppose let us write 500 pixels. Okay. So I've given the value as 500. Okay. So height equals to 500. I've written over here. And now I'm going to save this file. After saving this file, let us open and you can clearly see earlier the height was less. Now the height has increased. Yes. Moving on to the width part, let us open this and go to and type width. The spelling is very important. You have to type the correct spelling all the time. And let's make the width as suppose 700. Okay. Now I'm going to save this and let's check the output again. Now you can see the width has also increased. Earlier it was very less. Now we have increased the height and width also. Okay, students. So this is how you increase or decrease the height and width of the entire table. Now, students, one more point to be noted over here is that you can specify the height or width either by specifying the size in absolute pixels or by specifying the relative percentage of the screen size. So right now we have seen how we can increase the height and width by increasing or decreasing the or by using the value in pixels. Let us understand what is the meaning of this one. Okay, this thing, by specifying a relative percentage of the screen size. What is the meaning of this line? Okay, let's understand this. Relative percentage of the screen size. That means, that simply means, students, if, let me open a HTML page and then I'll explain you what is the meaning of that. So if this is my table and this is my screen size, okay, this entire from here to here is my width of the screen, and from here to here vertical is the height of the screen. Yes. Now let me first remove these two tags. Okay, let me first remove these two tags, height and width. Okay, and let me show you from the beginning only. So if I save this, so this is my table. Okay, this is my table. Okay, this is my table. If this from here to here is 100% height of my screen, and from here to here is the 100% width of my screen. Okay, let me draw the diagram only. See, from here to here, it is the 100% height of my screen, and from here to here is the 100% width of my screen. Okay, I can also increase or decrease the value of the height and width of the screen based on the percentage value of my screen. Okay, so if I give over here height equals to 50%. Okay, height equals to 50 and then write this percentage. Okay, and if I save this, you can see the from here to here, okay, the height has increased. Earlier it was somewhere over here till here, height was only till here, but now you can see the height of my table is just the half the height of my body of my this screen. Yes or no? From here to here it is 100%, and from here to here you can see that it is approximately 50% of my screen. Approximately not, it is exactly the 50%. Okay, students, moving on. If I give it width equals to again 50%, so what will happen is that it will take the 50% width of my screen. Okay, the width of the table will be 50% the width of my screen. So you can see that from here to here is my half of my screen, and from here to here is the another half width of my screen. So this is how you can increase or decrease the height and width of the table by using the percentage values. Okay, so whichever you like you can use it. The easiest one is by using the pixels. Okay, so just type the number inside the double quotes and you are good to go. Okay, so over here I've given 400 and 500 and I'm saving this, and this is the new height and width of my table. Okay, students, so this is how you change the height and width of entire table. Okay, now one more thing is written. Okay, it is also possible to control the dimension. Dimensions means what? Over here, because this is a two-dimensional figure. Okay, so we'll be only talking about the height and width. Okay, you can also control the dimension. Dimensions over here means height and width only. Okay, it is possible to control the dimensions of the individual table, cells or rows also. Okay, so you can either increase the height of the entire row, okay, of entire individual row also, or of a single cell also. Okay, how you can do that? If you want to increase the height of this entire row, then use your height attribute with the tr tag. Tr stands for table row. Okay, if you want to increase the height of a particular cell, then use height and width attributes inside the td or th tags. Okay, let me show you with the help of example, because you are not going to understand this without the example. So what I'm going to do, students, is I'm going to remove all the height and width features that I had given earlier. Okay, I'll just remove this and I'll keep my table as it was earlier. Okay, so this is the original height and width of my table. Okay, this much. Okay, this is the original height and width of my table. I'm zooming in right now. I'm not increasing the height and width. I'm zooming the screen. Okay, so this is the original height and width of my table and all the cells. Suppose I want to increase the height of this entire row over here, this first row. So what I'm going to do, I'll open the code and see this is my first row. Yes or no? I'll use the height attribute along with this particular tag. So I'll just write height equals to, suppose I'll give 100. Okay, not 100, I'll just give it 60. Okay, 60 pixels, and I'll save it. And now when I refresh it, you can see the height of only this row has been increased. Okay, students, if I want to increase the height, suppose of this last row, so what I'll go back to my original programming and see this is the first row, second row, third row, and this is the fourth row. So if I want to increase the height of the fourth row, I can just go height equals to, let's make this also as 60 and just save it, go over here and refresh it. So you can see the height of this particular entire row has been increased. Now I can increase the height and width of a particular single cell also. Okay, how to do that? Suppose I want to increase the height of this Bindu only, or Yogesh. Let's increase only the height of this. Okay, so I need to go to the uh, that particular cell associated with this Yogesh. So let me go back to programming. As you can see, this table data tag, okay, is associated with this table data. Okay, so I'll just go over here and I'll increase the width. Okay, this time I'll increase the width. So width equals to, suppose let me make it 100. Okay, sorry. So I've increased the width. Now let me save this and refresh this. So you can see the width of the entire this has been increased. Okay, students. So with this, you can increase or decrease the height. You can control the height and width of the entire table or the rows. Okay. So the entire columns, when you remember one thing, students, when you increase the width of a particular cell, the width of all the cells will be increased in that particular column. So this is the column. Okay, this is that particular column. So the width is going to increase for that entire, just like when we were increasing the height, the width of the entire column has been increased. Okay, so this is the entire column. So the width of entire column has been increased over here. Okay, students. So this is how we increase or decrease the height and width of the table or a cell or a row of a table or a column of a table using the height and width attributes. I hope this is clear to you. Uh, Now I'm going to put an end to this lecture. In the next class, we will be studying about the attributes of the TR, TD and TH individually, these stats only. Okay, how to change border color and BG color of these, of a table row or a table data, okay, or the table heading. Okay, that we will be studying in the next lecture. If you have any questions, you can ask me. You can comment on the videos comment section. Okay, students, take care of yourself and be well.